Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Justin the Food Entrepreneur Show. I'm Justin Bizzarro. I'm your host. That's Bizzarro. For anyone who's out there, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Justin the Food Entrepreneurs. You can also find us at Gorilla Brave on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and a blog as well. We are rebuilding the website as I record this podcast now. So that being said, I have a very special guest with us. It's actually the second time of us recording, but for the audience, it'll be the first time. Since I had a glitch in recording, I had 3 episodes that weirdly had a lot of static and issues in the episode that I couldn't remove. So Jesse from Secret Bodega, how are you doing today, Jesse, out of Nashville, Tennessee, has been kind enough to say, hey, we're going to re-record the episode. So with that being said, guys, Jesse is ready to go through this for a second time, probably repetitively, but at least this time I did go to the grand opening at the Pearl Diver. I have tried to lift the Secret Bodega delivery truck. I tried. It was parked outside. It's small, but it is heavy. And so let's talk about your business. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about your journey.
Yeah, man. First of all, thank you for having me, and I really appreciate that you came out to the friends and family. It's one thing to talk about what we do, and another thing to like actually go and take it in and see the space that I'm in and what we're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, well, and there's a whole concept here, and seeing the delivery truck, seeing the concept come to life at the grand opening, understanding how your concept is unique. It is a unique concept. I do think there is going to be more of this where restaurateurs go into existing food businesses and revitalize that particular part. I don't want to give it away for the audience because they don't know yet. This is their first time talking with us. But I want to talk about you, Jesse, your journey from little Jesse to big Jesse. How did you get into food entrepreneurship? How did you get to become a food entrepreneur? Obviously, as we were talking before we hit record, it's not an easy path. And I don't think anyone outside food understands the amount of variables that we deal with in a day that often don't go our way. So it's all yours, Jesse. It's your story.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I think I've always had some kind of entrepreneurial spirit or like inclination, but not when it comes to food. That was not my path. It wasn't anything that. I'm from Chicago originally, and I remember I had several friends Greek guys whose family had been in like the Greek diner business. So they kind of knew like, all right, I'm going to mess around and eventually like I'm going to take over the family restaurant. So they kind of set themselves up knowing the end of this all is going to be, at this restaurant. Not all of them, but a lot of my friends whose parents, were successful, they just kind of saw that path. I didn't have that. I'm a son of my father was a carpenter. My mom she later in life became a federal agent. So nothing anywhere near food. And, for me, I never worked at restaurants or anything. I was just, food was something that you had to do, you had to eat. and that's all I really knew. But again, having like a bit of an entrepreneurial bug, started building a bit of a foundation. So when I really got into food was in my mid to late 20s. I was living in Chicago and I started this grilling club that we called ManBQue. It was very tongue in cheek. And it was like, I'm a marketing guy by nature. That's my background professionally. So I kind of saw the trends that were happening. And there was a while where, like metrosexuals were the hottest thing, like really manicured dudes that were just spending tons of money trying to look, as handsome and as pretty as they could. And there was kind of this like decline in that in marketing. And there was like this rise in like the lumbersexual, like the bearded guys with flannels and stuff. And that was kind of where I fit in. And I saw this happening. And, it's kind of a joke. I wanted a gathering where my friends who were living outside of Chicago. Like people had their fun and they were kind of like, it's time to settle down, get married, have kids, move up to the burbs. I wasn't that guy. I love living in the city. So I was like, all right, here's the deal. Why don't we get together once a month? It was the last Thursday of every month. And we come over to my house, and I always had a bunch of grills, and I had this really cool space, and we had a rooftop overlooking the city. I'm like, we'll all just get together, drink some beers, grill some food. And that's how ManBQue was born. My, my buddy wanted to invite his girlfriend at the time. I said, no, dude, no chicks allowed. It's for men. It's a ManBQue. And somebody yelled it out. You know, we all raised our beer and yelled ManBQue. It was so silly and goofy, but it worked. It became this thing, and it grew and grew. And you know, now looking back, and hindsight's always 2020. Like looking back, I saw the importance of this organization. It was a place for dudes to be dudes, and we weren't, you know, like these dude. It was a different time. It was more, I guess, innocent is the thing. Like it was just a way for dudes to get away and hang out, drink some good beer. Craft beer was starting to become a thing, so people were bringing different beers to share, and it was like a really cool gathering and like this opportunity for guys to connect, because it's not easy for guys to connect with other guys, and you know, like to share your feelings. And it was this thing where like at the space at this time, these you were getting to know these guys for a few hours a month, and then it becomes years, you know. And the I'll never forget my friend Joey. He brought a buddy of his to one of the events who was a chef. And prior to this guy showing up, you know, people were just bringing hot dogs, you know, like maybe some good toppings, but nothing really like foodie, like nothing that was like blowing anybody away. We were bringing like frozen burger patties, and we thought that was like the culinary like highlight of those events. It was more just to hang out and have beer. And this guy shows up with this pork roll that he made with this remoulade, all these things. And we're like, who the hell is this guy? and like,
And what
now,
is a
like,
pork roll? No, I'm just kidding. Go on.
Yeah. We're like, there's pork in it, must be pork, right? But it was really nothing too fancy. But I also had this like annoyingly competitive gene. So this guy shows up and everybody's like, man, this is the best food we've ever had at ManBQue. And I'm like, you know, I'm hosting all these people. Like, I don't want some dude coming in and showing me up. So I just got in and started buying cookbooks and reading more about food. And it became this like obsession of mine. Like I just cooked and cooked. And then what it did was it elevated the food. So more and more guys were like, hey, let's do this. Let's step up our game. And people were trying stuff out, and it became this like really cool space for people to come in and try new things and share it. Like, and you had immediate feedback, you know, like you're sharing it and someone's in your own broken way explaining what they liked about it or what they didn't like about it. And again, this lasted years. So like in the beginning, it was very, very raw, and the feedback probably wasn't great, but it was something. And we started building this foundation. And as time went on, it grew, and Chicago media caught wind of it. I started doing interviews on television talking about what ManBQue was, and then sharing recipes. And, you know, at the time I worked a corporate job, and there was a bit where I was living on the road essentially for this company, and I would have to fly in to Chicago to do these like really short cooking segments and be part of these ManBQue meetings. And, you know, I saw what was happening there. And I like, for me, this sort of hobby just grew into a deeper love and admiration for food in general. But I got really into creating recipes and cooking. And again, the guys that were coming out, they got really into it too. And I was seeing that, you know, this ManBQue was becoming a really great creative outlet for so many. So I wanted to really focus on that. So I ended up quitting my corporate job, moved back to Chicago, and I took about a year off of drinking just because I really wanted to focus on this. And I was like, I want to give it every opportunity to succeed. And I want to give myself every opportunity and to succeed and be fully focused. So for this year, we were just like cranking out recipes. And, my goal was to maybe someday write a book. And, the food TV shows were becoming a big deal. And so I said, it'd be nice to have a book and a
And this
food
is all
TV
taking
show.
place in Chicago, correct, at this time, right? Just so I
Yeah.
can set we haven't made the leap to Nashville yet, but I just want to anchor that for the audience. All this is still taking place in Chicago, very much a food mecca in the United States, very unnecessarily competitive with one another, but still a food mecca, I would say, of the United States still to this day. So I just want to anchor that for everyone. So you're creating a recipe book. You're trying to put this together because you guys are enjoying doing this, and in your competitive nature that we just talked about a little bit, you're trying to make the best cookbook possible, basically, or set of recipes.
Yeah, the recipes were, we were writing these down. Everything that we were doing that we thought was worth it. You're saving, and trying out and trying out. And as it kind of happened, there was a weekend where this is one of my funniest stories. On a Friday night, I was introduced to this guy who worked for a publisher in Chicago. His name was also Jesse. I don't even remember his last name, but he was one of the biggest jerks I've ever met. He told me how nobody buys cookbooks, which was kind of stupid that a guy that worked for a publishing house told me nobody bought cookbooks. And he mockingly said, well, you can self-publish. It's only like $40,000. He's talking to a guy that left a real job to pursue his dream. So I have less than nothing. And then he goes, oh, or you can find a literary agent. And I said, oh, that's a good idea. He's like, what are you going to do? Google it? He's like, you don't find them. They find you. Good luck. And it was one of the most condescending things I've ever come across. But that just fueled me, And so this is a Friday night. And I texted my buddies about this encounter because prior to that, to the actual meeting, I was really excited because my buddy's like, hey, yeah, my friend works at a publisher. So I was like, cool, cool, cool. And then after it happened, everybody's like, how'd it go? I'm like, it was terrible. This guy's a jerk. And I told the whole story. So the next morning, that Saturday morning, an article came out on ManBQue. We were on the front page of the Chicago Tribune, which was one of the two biggest newspapers in Chicago when newspapers were a big, powerful thing. So that happened that morning. Later on that evening, there was a segment that we had filmed for a local TV show that came out. And then Sunday in the evening, we were on another TV show, and I get this email around 10 p.m. And I was like, hey, Jesse, my name is Doe Coover. Have you ever considered writing a cookbook? I think you should. So I honestly thought that one of my friends had put together a fake website, a fake name, and emailed me just to fuck with me. Like, haha, hey, I'm a literary agent and I'm reaching out to you. So I'm like, okay. And I go on this website, and this Doe Coover person, I'm like, that doesn't even sound like a real name, Doe Coover, so go on the website. Looks like a website that my mom would put together. So I immediately was like, oh, I know who put this together. And then I look at the list of clients that she has, and you've got people like Jacques Pepin, Rick Bayless, Roy Choi, and I'm like, hold up. My friends don't know enough about food to know these big name chefs. So I said, I'll play along with this. And I responded to the email. I said, hey, Doe, thank you for reaching out. I have considered writing a cookbook. And, I shared my idea, would love to talk to you, thinking it was going to be BS. And I said, this is when I'm available. Here's my number. Talk to you soon. The next day, calls me. I see this number show up, and it's a Massachusetts number. I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, what kind of joke is this? And I stepped out of the office, and behind me, my friends were in the office actually building websites. So that's why I was like, it's these guys. So I answer the call, and it's this lady. It's Doe Coover. She's a real person, and she's like a big name literary agent. So we chatted. She was, I was in Chicago, and I happened to be in town for Rick Bayless release event for one of his books, and saw you on TV. I thought what you were doing with ManBQue was interesting and cool, and I think you should, work in food or write a book. And I said, okay. So we chatted, and excuse me, I invited one of my best friends, John Carruthers, into the whole thing. I said, "Hey, man, he's to this day one of my favorite writers, food writers, and we have a really strong bond and always bounce ideas back and forth with each other." And for me, the idea of a book, I was like, if I'm going to write it, I would love to do it with him, just because I know our humor, I know how we get along, and his strong writing and everything else, like it would just work out. So I asked him if he would be interested, and I told him that this literary agent reached out to me. He was down, so that was like a big part of it. And then I told Doug Hoover, I said, "Yeah, let's talk." She met us, two unproven authors, and she saw something in us and took a chance. We ended up selling the book to a publisher in Philadelphia, and that was kind of how everything really started becoming even more real than before. Like getting a book deal. And our first book, that was entitled ManBQue, came out, and I mean, it was a big success, and that's kind of like what got me serious about food. Where before it was like a hobby, and I started doing pop-ups all over Chicago as ManBQue. We were doing these like grilling burger events and sausage, just live fire events throughout the city. And it was actually a way to for me to pay my bills, because I didn't have a job. I was really pursuing this food thing, this food dream. So I was doing catering gigs under the guise of ManBQue. And it was such a novel thing, like, oh, this guy comes out and he's got a team and they just grill stuff. But it was good stuff. So now we have this book behind us. It came out, and I saw the potential in everything that we had. And at the time when the book was about to be released, I had just taken this job at a brewery. So this job was one of those dream jobs that doesn't come around very often. Essentially, my job was to travel the world and do beer focused events. And so I took the job. The book is selling, and the publisher says, "Hey, let's get you on for another book." So at the time, I'm traveling nonstop, like 7 months out of the year, I'm on the road. And then we get this book deal, we sign it, and I had to help write this book with John. And at this time, too, we invited one of my best friends, John Scholl, into the mix, too. And John Scholl was one of the founders of ManBQue with me. So, like, it was like a party. Like, I had my favorite people, I bet my best buds, and we're putting this book together. But realistically, if I ever fell out of love, it was around this time, because I was just so stressed. I had so much work. I wasn't at home. And when I was coming back home from my work trips, I had to, R&D recipes, where before I had nothing going on. Like realistically, I didn't have a 9 to 5, so I could focus fully on the first book. But that was the closest I ever got to like turning my back on food and just being like, this isn't for me. And it was brutal. So as I was working at the brewery, I was doing a lot of food and beer events and working with a lot of chefs. And so the love didn't really completely die out, but it was, for the most part, it was more of a functional thing. I didn't want to I wasn't having fun with it. And as time went on, I kind of came around to it, and my employer was, giving me more and more opportunity to not only talk about food, but practice, doing different food things. And my love started kind of blossoming again, and left that brewery. And then COVID hits, and it was like, well, like, here's an opportunity to sit at home and do more cooking. And by that time, I was back into the swing of cooking and food, and my love for food was probably at an all-time peak. Well, when everybody was practicing their sourdough recipes, I was practicing my birria recipe, which is a precursor to my latest cookbook. But at the time, I was like, I just want to make the best birria I can. And I was having people over. It felt like every day. I had friends coming over during COVID, and distancing ourselves, but I was cooking for people, and it was a really great time. And it was like this moment in time where I had the skills to back up what I was doing, and then I had the creativity to like be bold and do more. So that time was really important. And at the same time, while COVID's happening, a lot of personal things happened to me that really affected my trajectory. One of the biggest ones is I lost my best friend. He, had an undiagnosed heart condition, and he passed away, and it really affected me because he was also one of the guys that helped me found ManBQue. So, forever cooking was tied to my best friend Rick. And so, it was a moment where I was kind of like, well, like, what do I do? And you can either stop and just kind of be sad and let it crush you, or, be stronger. And for me, in order to be stronger, I had to change things up a little bit. And that's when I ended up leaving Chicago. I met the woman of my dreams, my partner, Audrey. And I said, you know what? She's living in Nashville. Why the hell not? If I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. So I moved down to Nashville, which is where I am now. And I wanted to impress this gal that I was at the time courting. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to cook for you. And here I was, like, 2 cookbooks under my belt, countless TV appearances. And I'm like, man, this girl doesn't even know how cool I am. I'm going to show her. So I make her dinner. And she was like, oh, that was really good. But I knew she wasn't impressed. So I'm like, all right, that kind of sucks. She's like, let me make you dinner next time. And I was like, sure, whatever. Next time she makes me dinner, next time we were hanging out, she makes me dinner and just blows my mind. I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, you're such a good cook. So, we were like sitting there just talking, like, yeah, I'm trying to impress you. She's like, girl, I've been cooking forever, and cooking's one of her big hobbies. And she never made that clear to me. So I was like, all right, yeah, you're good. So then we thought it'd be cool to start cooking together. And, what if we did like a pop-up and like fed other people? And she's like, well, I've never done that. And that's something that I'd done in Chicago. I'm like, Nashville would love this. And
I
met a
love it.
couple of people. Yeah, it was awesome. And so there's a chef in Nashville who is, I consider, one of my very close friends. And the dude he's just one of the kindest people. And he's such a talent. His name is Julio Hernandez, and he owns a food truck called Nice La Vida. It's not just a food truck. That's how he started. He owned a really wonderful restaurant. He's been nominated for James Beard, but before that, he invited me to hang out and chat, and we got to know each other. And I said, yeah, man, like, I've spent my last, whatever, it's actually my whole professional career has been in marketing. And, I told him about ManBQue and how I got into food, and I was doing pop-ups in Chicago, but I never did it professionally. It was always a hobby. And he goes, oh, cool. So you want to do food here in Nashville? I said, yeah, I've never done it. So, like, why the hell not? And he's like, cool. So, like, what in particular do you want to do? I said, well, I've been working on this cereal recipe for the last couple of years. And he's like, that's what I do. So I was like, shit, well, great. In Chicago, what I always tell people is you can have a guy from the north side of Chicago that meets a guy from the south side of Chicago, and one makes a deep dish pizza, one makes a thin crust, and they meet, they know what each other does, and they go their own separate ways. The community isn't as strong as it could be, But here in Nashville, I literally
I want to
was,
anchor this actually really quickly, just for everyone, your point, because it is true. For some reason, Chicago is unnecessarily competitive with one another. That place could grow more franchises, more restaurant chains than anywhere else in the world. The talent's there, similar to New York. But I think because of proximity, there's an unnecessary competitiveness, and people steal ideas. That happens. It's human nature. And so it leads to this fear mindset. But the reality is it doesn't lead that. Anyone can see the podcast. I think I've had one person from Chicago on the podcast because the response is always the same. They don't want to give away their secrets, and they don't want their competitors knowing what they're doing. The pizza guy 300 blocks away from them, potentially.
yeah,
When you're one pizza shop, the guy 300 blocks away doesn't matter. So, but it is true. And it is a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset. If an abundance mindset is there's plenty to go around for everyone and we can build an industry, no different than burgers, Wendy's, Burger King, McDonald's all came up at the same time. They were all worried there wasn't enough room for all of them. Well, guess what? There's enough room for all of them plus many, 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 many more burger chains and franchises. So,
So
go ahead.
that's the thing. In Chicago, you have, I think there's like over 9 million people in the Chicago metro area, like including the suburbs, right? So there's more than enough people, right? Where in Nashville, not like Nashville's, I want to say like a third of Chicago. So here you have this chef who I would literally be taking money out of his pocket by doing something with him. And what does he do? He invites me on his food truck to make birria while this guy's making his name through birria. So the mindset, like, I think that says a lot about him. He was actually born in Mexico, but lived in New York, but raised in Mexico. So like that's a very Mexican mindset too, though. Like I'm Mexican as well. So like, it's always like, how do you help? Yeah, how do you help other people out? It's like you think of others first, and that's what he was doing. He's like, you're new to town, let me help you out. And in Chicago, it would have never worked. And when people ask me if I would ever move back to Chicago, my friends and family out there, I love the culture, I love the food, but I would never live in Chicago again. It's such a huge part of me. But from like a business standpoint, what I'm doing here in Nashville would have never worked in Chicago. It's I think we had mentioned this before in previous conversations where Chicago is like that big brother, right? Like the big brother who was always like the little guy compared to New York or San Francisco. So we got this chip on our shoulder. So then, when your big brother, which is Chicago, here's what you're doing. They're just ready to shoot you down. Like everything that you've done, it's like, this guy did this back then. This is not new. Everything has been done. And you're never going to impress your big brother. And for me, it was like, when you're younger, you want to do that. You want to impress people. And when you get older, you're just kind of like, I want to do what I do. And if people get down with it, cool. If not, it's okay too, And moving to Nashville and starting to feed people here, people got really behind the food that Audrey and I were making. And we just kept doing it. We were having fun with recipes that we would create at home and make for each other. And then we learn how to scale them up and how to tweak them enough for, when you make food, you obviously have to feed yourself, but you're not making food for yourself necessarily. Like you're making food for other people. So I like really spicy. You can't make really spicy food. It just doesn't work that way. Like you get those weirdos that get like ass blaster hot sauces and stuff like that, but they're very, there's not that many of them. There's not enough of them to sustain your business. So you have to make something that might have a kick, but it's not going to blow people's palates, So all that to say, Nashville was so welcoming to my food ideas and what we wanted to do. And it's been a really cool journey. And when we started doing pop-ups here in Nashville, like, the first few, we get a good crowd. And then the next thing I knew, every pop-up that we were doing was selling out. And people were coming out and just, again, like having fun with what we were making. And it sounds cheesy, but the food that we wanted to make, that we were making, was very playful. It played on nostalgia. It played on familiar flavors. So it was an easy entry for people to come by, and they were like, all right, this doesn't bite. Let's see. And they taste the food and they end up falling in love with it. And, we pay a lot of attention to things from our sauces to our seasonings. That's very important to us. So it's been really cool to see people come out and dig our food. So, here we are doing all these pop-ups. And about almost a year ago, Jamie, the owner of this really cool spot called Pearl Diver, it's a tropical bar in East Nashville. And the funny thing was that spot was one of the first places that I went to when I started visiting Nashville, when Nashville became like a spot that I was maybe thinking about moving to. And when my mom came to visit me, that's the first place we took her to. So Pearl Diver had a piece in my heart, and we met up with Jamie at Pearl Diver, and he kind of like, I felt like he was interviewing me a little bit, like, hey, so tell me about Secret Bodega and what you guys are doing, what you want to do. And he said, would you ever open a restaurant? And I was like, hell no. I have no interest in opening a restaurant. I have no idea how to run a restaurant. And he's like, I got this business and this other business that's going to be kind of like a food truck park. And I was like, fuck no. There's no, I don't want to, no, no. And he goes, oh, I wasn't going to offer you a space over there. I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, so you want to do a collab or something? He goes, well, my chef here at Pearl Diver, I'm taking him to work on this other project. I've got a fully loaded kitchen here, fully stocked kitchen. Would you ever consider moving in and being my food partner? And I was like, that changed things, because it's one thing to find a spot that has nothing and
don't mess
go
with
into like
don't mess with God, man. He'll get rid of every obstacle in your way until you're on your knees being like, okay, I'll do it. Finally, I get it. You've removed every obstacle. I'm going to do this.
Yeah. And that was the thing, it was the scariest part about owning a restaurant is not the day to day, right? It's the beginning and the end are always like the toughest parts of almost anything. It's almost like a shift, right? Like a restaurant shift. The opening of that shift is the most work. When you're humming along and cooking food, that's easy. But then you have to close the kitchen that night, and that's that hard work again, right? So restaurants are the same way. For me, it was like I don't have the money to drop, let's say $500,000. I don't have that money to drop that to go in that hole and dig my way out. It's such a gamble, and I'm not a gambler. Like that doesn't appeal to me. It's stressful to even think about. For me, I originally really just wanted to be a CPG brand. I thought Secret Bodega was very strong, and what I really wanted to do was sell my Secret Bodega sauces. We partnered up with JP Graziano. He's going to be making our Jardinera. So, and we also have a cold brew brand. And so like that was the stuff that I really cared about. Our cold brew is made by Metric, who's also in Chicago. And I saw what they were doing. And I'm like, you guys are killing it in Chicago. And I want to bring some of that down here through my lens. And that was like my focus. Like I never wanted to open a restaurant. That wasn't my thing because I didn't think the perfect opportunity existed. And then bam, here we are talking to this guy who's asking us if we want to move into his kitchen. And, I really had to take time to think about it. And I talked to a lot of my peers here in Nashville. And when I went up to Chicago for the holidays, I talked to my former peers in Chicago and friends of mine, other friends that run restaurants successfully, some that have closed them, and just kind of like, hey, this is what the opportunity is. What do you think I should do? And it was a resounding yes, do this, because the worst that can happen, it doesn't succeed. And I go back to pushing my CPG brand and doing what I was doing before. Since that was successful, it's like, you still have this brand, it's strong. You can always go back to what you were doing before. But, when I moved into Pearl Diver, I really saw the potential in what we could do as the brand, but also like, you're trying food out and you're getting feedback in real time. And, there's these ebbs and flows and you're learning so much. And it's been a really great opportunity. Even from when you came in to the friends and family, that was very like trial by fire. That was such a hectic day. I think I talked to two people that day, like two friends that came by. Most of my interactions with friends were I've seen their name on the monitor in the back when their order is being fulfilled. I was like, oh, hey, that guy's here. Click. Oh, she's here. Click. But opening that space was scary as hell, and it continues to be exciting. It's not as scary, but it's still very exciting. And when I created the first menu for the space, it was something that I wanted to get my team to have. Essentially, I wanted muscle memory. I want these folks to be able to make this menu with their eyes closed. And I think we're finally at that point, and we're starting to add more things, and it's getting even more exciting. And the kitchen itself, before I got there, didn't open till 5 p.m. So when I got there, we started talking about doing happy hour, and I was like, hell yeah, we have to do happy hour. And then I was also like, well, why do you have a kitchen that doesn't open till 4 p.m.? Like, let's utilize this. So last Saturday was our first day trying out grab and go breakfast. And I brought in a partner, my friend Jonathan Humphrey. He owns a brand called Freshville. And we met at the commissary kitchen a while back, and we were just share ideas and talk about food. And when I moved into Pearl Diver, I was like, hey, why don't you come in and work out of my kitchen and just pick each other's brain? And I was like, hey, I want to do this breakfast thing. And dude's a really good chef. And, he's been such a great help. So we started talking about what a grab and go breakfast menu could be like. And we started doing empanadas. And last week we did breakfast burritos. That's a big part of my business of Secret Bodega is our wholesale business. And we do breakfast burritos for countless accounts here in town. So I was like, I think it's kind of expected for us to do burritos. So we did burritos last Saturday, but I don't know. They're really great, but a lot of people do breakfast burritos. And I think moving forward, we're talking about adding some breakfast sandwiches, and I really want to do some brunch crunch wraps. And we did some R&D on those, and people really like those. So I think that's going to be the move.
I love this. I'm going to anchor something for the audience as well, and then I'm going to ask you some questions. From a sociological standpoint, Chicago hasn't had a disaster since probably the Chicago fires, which are decades ago, which most of us didn't even live through. And COVID doesn't count because everyone went through it. When everyone goes through something, or a very large group of people across a whole country or world go through it, it doesn't quite affect everyone the same way. It's an equalizer, not a differentiator. That being said, New York 9/11, hurricane hits, New York's underwater, so on and so forth, earthquakes, fires, California, all sorts of things. Nashville flooded 2010s, early 2010s. So New Orleans, Katrina, underwater, rebuilt. So cities go through things, and often the competitiveness that once held the city back, Nashville was equally one of them, particularly in livestock and the way the city was, and not even allowing in Airbnbs, and just a lot of restrictions on the city, which became restrictions on infrastructure. But when the mindset changes, when the abundance changes, when people come together to build an industry, in Nashville, the entrepreneurs there understand that they're building an industry. Nashville's not even close to done growing. And I don't even know how many honky tonks just opened in the last 3 years since I've been heavily focusing on Nashville as one of the key growing spots in the world. I do believe that from a food standpoint. It's rapid, massive tourism, music, artists with money and names, investors, restaurateurs with money and names, all of it coming together and supporting it. That's a big deal, guys. And Nashville's kind of a weird mixture of California and New York anyway, and the way that it's built and the way that it's laid out, even with its suburbs. So I'm just going to anchor that for everyone. Sociologically, we are part of our environment. And if we don't fit into our environment, we get squeezed out, or we're very miserable if we don't allow ourselves to be squeezed out. So Jesse's blossoming. He's doing the cookbooks. He's not competitive. He's collaborative. It's not exactly working. So life pulls him into Nashville, where his skill set, his life skills are more suitable to what's going on. He's been equipped, but now it's time to go take his equipping on mission and taking it to Nashville, because I think this idea is very much a part of the future, the collaboration of both. I want to run a bar, you want to run a food place. How do we do it together? We talked about the other companies that are doing things similar, that have found partners where they're doing the food, and because the individuals don't want to do the alcohol or even run the bars. Eventually the food entrepreneur takes over the bars as well. So just This is life. Life is not big wins, guys. Life is not, oh, give me money and I'll do a lot with it. If we have the money and we weren't doing a lot with no money, we're not going to do a lot with money. That's not the way it works. We have to gain the skills and be efficient with the lack of, and become better with taking the lack of and turning it more of. And then the things gain momentum and the doors open up. It's very small steps that eventually stack up and look like big steps or big leaps. But the reality is they were all small steps that stacked up. Let's talk about the integration. Let's talk about opening the menu, the recipe items, the changing of them, all of that, how this has gone at the Pearl Diver, because it's been roughly 8 weeks now, maybe a little bit more since that opening. Let's talk about all of this. How's that going? Let's talk about menu. Let's talk about pivoting. Let's talk about expectations re-centered.
Yeah, so realistically, I originally wanted to open in June. I wanted a long runway, and kind of what happened was May 14th, I'm sorry, May 4th, there was an event, and they're like, hey, do you want to do the food for this event? I said, I could do that. And then the next day was Cinco de Mayo, of course. So they're kind of like, well, I did a Cinco de Mayo event last year, which it's become a thing now. This was the second year, but we did an old school Taco Bell menu for Cinco de Mayo last year, because I thought it'd be really funny if a real Mexican like myself did the least authentic Mexican possible menu for the least authentic Mexican holiday. And I had fun with it. And people last year came out, like they showed up. Nashville was ready for Taco Bell. And you had dudes coming in with these old school Taco Bell shirts. And it was ridiculous. We made enough food for 4 hours, and we sold out in less than 2 hours. So that being said, this year I was planning on doing a Taco Bell event, and the guys were like, what if you did your Taco Bell pop-up, your Cinco de Mayo, the day after this other event? So it's like, all right, cool. And then it became, well, since you're here doing these events, you might as well just start doing your food. And that put me in a weird spot, because I was like, all right, I guess I moved in now to the space, but I hadn't built a team yet. And I was supposed to inherit a team, the folks that were currently working in the kitchen, and they all jumped ship. I went from thinking I was going to have a team to having nobody. So the first couple weeks before the friends and family, if I can be completely candid, were hell. Like I was barely sleeping. My body was just in constant stress, and I was exhausted. I had actually lost a bunch of weight because I was like not even eating. I was just there constantly. It was brutal, man. And I remember there was a Tuesday I'll never forget, and I was texting Audrey, and I said, did I make a mistake? I don't know if this is for me. Like I don't, like, how do I get out of this? And I had signed I signed a lease. Like you can't just get out of it. It's like I have to put my big boy pants on and figure it out. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to do for the menu, like before the real menu, I had to cobble something up so I can start making money, so I can be able to put together a menu, once I had a team. So it was like all these things, just this madness where like I had to figure it out on the fly. And there was one dude that was the chef there, and I thought I was going to have him for at least a month. And then his life situation changed drastically. Like he had to move out of his place. So him and his wife were like, you can't find a place in Nashville at the same price that you had it in, like, a matter of days. And like his landlord was like, oh, by the way, I'm not going to renew your lease. So he had to up and leave. And I lost the last thing that was kind of tying me to the former menu and kitchen at Pearl Diver. So like it was literally, now I was like, all right, I'm left with just the kitchen, no staff, no guidance. I got to figure it out. And I did. It was not easy, but I had to like take a moment, take a breath, and figure out what the next steps were. So I started building my menu, and my ideas always go to nostalgia. Like I start thinking about what I love. But like I said, you have to build a menu for other people, not just you. But there was a couple things that I wasn't going to budge on, and there was a couple items on the menu that I had already done a proof of concept through collaborations. So when I moved here, I started doing a lot of collab events with different friends of mine in the industry here, different restaurants. For me, I always say it's a party, right? Food should be a party, and the more people at the party, the more fun it is. So when it comes to food, to be able to work with other chefs it's such a joy. One of my closest friends here in Nashville, Aaron Clemens, owns Bill's Sandwich Palace. Him and his wife have been some of the best friends, and just they're wonderful humans, and they've opened their doors to me. They don't need to do collabs. They don't. They have a line of people outside of their spot the few days that they're open every week, and they invited me to their place to do events. And some of the things on my menu now I had practiced at my collab events with Bill's Sandwich Palace. So I'm like, there's something here. It may not seem like this is a thing, but people want it. So one of them was my Bodega puff, which is my take on a Chicago pizza puff. So you talking about nostalgia, I have a whole story about pizza puffs. It goes back to my best friend Rick that passed away, and my co-author, my former co-author John Carruthers, who's still one of my best friends. He wrote a couple of pizza cookbooks, and one of my pizza puff recipe is in one of his books. So like I brought that because I'm like, this means a lot to me, and I have one of the other items that I have on the menu is this coconut shrimp with a huli huli sauce. And so I call it a huli huli shrimp. And that's one of those, if I can be completely honest, coconut shrimp sells. People don't mind dropping cash for coconut shrimp. So like you've got one of those, but then you have on the same menu something with like a deep story, like my pizza puff, and then there's a guy in town, my friend Derek, who owns Upstate Pierogi. He makes amazing pierogies. The guy's from upstate New York, and him and I collaborated a while back on some pierogies. And I do this giardiniera dip. Giardiniera is a huge, huge part of me and Secret Bodega. I use giardiniera in so many different recipes and sauces and toppings. It's fantastic. So when I partnered up with Derek from Upstate Pierogi, we filled these pierogies with giardiniera, with my giardiniera dip, and he made a batch, sold them at the farmer's market, and he sold out in less than 2 hours. It was insane. He's like, dude, these pierogies just sold. Like they just moved. So when I was putting together the menu, I'm like, you know what? I want to do pierogies. And people were like, Nashville's not a pierogi town. And the numbers, the amount of pierogies that I sell per week, you would think that you were back in Chicago and there's a huge Polish neighborhood like in Chicago, but it's not. You're in Nashville, and it's like people just, besides the fact that they're really good, there's so many people. There's almost like this element of curiosity where people are like, what's a pierogi? And they have it and they taste it and it's fantastic and they order more. So the menu, all that to say is the menu, was something that had to be close to who I am and really represent who I am as not just a business owner or a food person, but who I am as a human. Like I'm a very proud, born and raised Chicagoan from Mexican ancestry. So like all these things play into what I do. One of the things that when I talk about opening my spot, you find people that are like, "Oh, are you going to sell tacos and burritos?" I'm like, "Why the hell would I do that?" And it was kind of offensive because people, I think they look at you and they're like, "Oh, he's Mexican, so he's going to do that." And I'm like, that's not the move. It's not who I am. Like I didn't grow up in Mexico, so people don't seem to think about that sometimes. And like I grew up in Chicago in a Mexican family, so like my experience with Mexican food is through this different lens, So like for me, it's like I'm influenced by what I knew firsthand, and it was Chicago food, not just Mexican food. It was Chicago Mexican, and Chicago's got a very big Indian population, so like There's Indian flavors that I incorporate into my food. Large Korean population. There's Korean flavors. For me, it was the menu had to be a reflection again of what I saw in the food world. And, you know, I traveled extensively, so I got to try food from a bunch of different places, and I continue to be inspired by other countries and other flavors, and they find their way into my menu. And here in Nashville last year, there's a it's called Nashville Burger Week. It's a pretty big deal, and it's like 60 of the best restaurants in town all make a burger to try to win, Nashville's best burger. So we did it 2 years ago. Sold, I think it was like 700 burgers in 1 week, and I didn't think I was gonna care, but not winning kind of like I was like, well, like how do you ever compete against like these downtown Nashville restaurants? And the restaurant that won 2 years ago was like owned by this. It's like a restaurant from New York. It's a chain, and they won. So it's like, of course, like they're gonna win. They have all their people from New York voting for them. So instead of complaining, I last year I was like, I'm gonna do this again, and my goal is to win. It was a long shot, and I have a team of it was Audrey at home doing social media. I was the one working the griddle. My buddy Dave was prepping the burgers, and my friend Betsy and Amy, they would alternate days, and they worked to register. So, here we are, literally a team of four going up against the biggest restaurants in Nashville, and we took home the crown last year. We won Burger Week, and it was such a huge deal. And that's when people started coming out of the woodwork asking if we ever wanted to open a burger restaurant. And so now that changed our food trajectory a little bit, because now you're known for this thing. And when I was creating my menu for the Secret Bodega, I was like, damn, like, I didn't want to add a burger, but that's what we were kind of known for. So I had to add burgers, and I love my burgers. I'll put them up against anybody. So it was one of those where it's like, I had to be smart. And if you don't put a burger, you're leaving a bunch of money on the table, and that's just not a very smart business move. So I'm like, all right, screw it. I'll put burgers on the menu, and they're one of our best sellers. And on top of that, another food item that's also a big seller is our crunch wraps. Like, same thing. Like, you can't do a Taco Bell pop-up event and sell hundreds of crunch wraps and not put a crunch wrap on your menu. And we did. And to this day, crunch wraps and burgers, huge sellers.
Yeah, I tried the crunch wrap. Was one of the things I tried when I was there for the opening, friends and family. It was very similar to the original one for sure. I loved it.
It's fun. Again, it's nostalgia. People, you want to do something that is close enough to the original, but elevated, right? I did a chopped cheese crunch wrap for fun because I had a bunch of burgers and I love chopped cheeses. I'm like, what if I just turn this into a crunch wrap, and we put it on a secret menu, and people showed up and they were just like, hey, I want this. So that's going to be making its way onto the phase 2 menu, which we're about to launch in about a week.
Very cool. Let's talk about all the lessons you're learning during this time: inventory, food costs, employees. Like, you're just taking on a lot. You've had to bring on a new staff, train them, and you talked about how stressful it all has been. Let's talk about where all of that is, how you got through it, and anchor it a little bit, because you are on the other side of it. You have a really cool truck, by the way, the delivery one, and you have all these things going for you. I just want to sort of anchor the hard stuff. Talk about how you got through it, because there are times we want to quit, but you do pick yourself up and keep going. So let's just talk about those a little bit, if you don't mind, Jesse.
Yeah, of course. As far as staffing, I thought I was going to inherit a team. So it was one of those things that I didn't think I was going to have to deal with immediately. And that wasn't the case. So, we put out on social media that we were looking for people. And the cool thing was there's a lot of people that vouch for us. So in Nashville, there's always people posting. I'm in a bunch of different like Facebook groups. Like, Nashville service industry groups and stuff. And again, the cool thing was people would vouch for us. So like people look at your posts, and if no one's vouching for you, you're just kind of this, you're taking a shot in the dark. But if somebody comes up and says, "Hey, Jesse's a good guy. We love Secret Bodega," then people are like, "All right, tell me more about this job." So uh, I built my team. One of the guys, my first hire, young dude, very green guy, but he went to culinary school and very good attitude towards things. And we hit it off right away. I could tell that he was very willing to learn, and got him involved. And then another friend of mine, he, that's Sam, who he's now my kitchen lead. He worked for another really great restaurant in town. So I knew that he had that experience, like that high volume experience. And he reached out to me. He was like, "Hey man, I'm interested in this job." And I was like, "Well, you currently work this other place, and my another close friend of mine runs that place." I'm like, "I don't want him to think that I'm like poaching his employees." He's like, "No, I need it." He was looking for a change. And we talked about what Secret Bodega was going to be. And it really interested him because he felt that he got to a point where he was kind of being stymied and he wasn't growing. So like he wanted to move into a place where his ideas were actually taken into consideration, and he could make a difference. Like he could, incorporate his passion and skill into things that would end up being on a menu, and which he's done. So he jumped on board, and that helped me out. And then there was a gal who came in who used to work at Pearl Diver, and was laid off during a slow season, and she was like a friend of the former cook at Pearl Diver, and he had hit me up and was like, "Hey, are you still looking for people?" I said, "Yes, I am." And he sent her along my way. She's very quiet, and she didn't tell me how talented she was. So I was kind of like, I don't know if she really wants to work, or like, and I was like, not trying to be offensive, but I was like, do you want to like help work the dish pit? Like she never shared that that she knew how to work the line and also do prep. So I was like, I'll let you know if we get busy enough, like maybe I can get you some hours. And then I hired a friend of mine who was very this is very fresh too. She just resigned. I hired a friend, and I learned a lesson. Like when you hire a friend, you have to interview them even more intensely than you would a complete stranger. I feel that this friend of mine wanted to be a boss, like from day one. And it was like, you have to learn to crawl before you learn to run, right? And it, like, slowly but surely, I saw that it wasn't going to be a good fit. And I was very accommodating to their schedule because, you know, I'm new to owning a business like this. And I feel like I was being more of a friend than a boss. So I was being probably more accommodating because I was being a friend than a boss. Like now, after this all went down, I'm like, screw it. If you know me outside of Secret Bodega, like I'm not going to hire you first of all, probably. But like it's gonna be different now that you work for me, because that's when I put my boss pants on. And so I hired this person, and I saw that they weren't as like I just felt that they took it like I'm working for a friend instead of I'm working for this company. And that also affected their attitude towards work. A couple times they were hungover when they were at work, and it's like, you're working too freaking slow. Like I'm paying you. It's not like I'm not paying you. It's not like you're coming in and like you're doing me a favor. Like I'm paying you. And again, I feel like when you have friends that work for you, it's very easy for them to treat you like a friend instead of a boss. And all that to say, I just hired another friend of mine, but he's worked for me. He's worked for the wholesale part of my business, and he takes it very serious. And he lost his job, and I said, "Hey, you know what? I can use you here." And I learned how to move parts around. So like Abigail, who I used to have working the line, and she essentially like ran the fry station. I invited her to come in a couple times to help me prep, and I saw how fast she worked, and I was like, I have it all wrong. I have people in the wrong places. Like you have to put people in a place to succeed. You have to look at figure out their strengths, but beyond that, like, what do they really want to do? So Sam, who's my kitchen lead at night, the dude works the line. Like, he could take on, last night was a perfect example. He was swamped and didn't bat an eyelash. That guy, cause he's a machine. But at his other job, he was prep and he wasn't into it. Like, so if I would have hired him to do prep, who knows? He might have left, like, because he was burnt out by the prep stuff, but he likes the cooking part. And Abigail, I wasn't challenging her enough. I was putting her in a station where she just was dropping, our fried food, when in reality she wanted to like bash sauces and do all these things. So I had to put her in a position to succeed, and now she's killing it. My buddy Kyle, he's helping with Expo. He's helping with the fry. Like, he's very personable guy. So when our barbacks are busy and food needs to be dropped off, Kyle jumps in and he does it. And so again, like, putting people in positions to succeed is like, and that's, you would think it's easy. It's easier said than done. Like, you would think it's something that just happens, but no, like, I didn't know how to do that. I worked in the corporate world for so long where, it was one of those things where there was more than enough people that wanted to work at these places. And, you can interview them, and if it didn't work out, next person steps up. And now I'm in an industry where that's not the case at all. There's not a lot of people looking for this kind of work because the pay is not as great as like a corporate job. And for me, I think it's very important that I pay people fair wages. Everybody gets, I didn't cut corners there. I'm not going to like try to bring people in because I'm not doing anybody a favor. That's not what it is. Like, they're working and they deserve to get paid their worth, So yeah, all that to say is that was one of the hardest parts of opening the secret bodega at Pearl Diver was, putting that team together. But I feel like, knock on wood, I have a really good team right now, and I'm ready for growth. And also bringing on Chef Jonathan Humphreys, who's helping me out with other processes, that's been a huge help because he's got that experience. And instead of me, learning on the fly or, trial by fire, like, I've got someone that's helping me, that's guiding me and saying, hey, these are some of the pitfalls. So maybe do this instead of this. And, it's been great having his eyes and ears in the kitchen too. So I'm very, very happy with the team that I have now.
My last question for you. Let's talk about mentorship, leadership, the people that have invested in you, whether it's been for the book or for the restaurant or for the pop-ups. There's been a lot there that have led to what I would call the trajectory you're on and the willingness not to give up. It's a big deal. Most people don't fail because their business fails or whatever. They just give up because they think they're not making enough money, so it's not worth their time. And I'm going to anchor this for the audience. The part of the reason I asked this question is because time is the most valuable resource universally and biblically. While there's money talked about in the Bible, profit is seeked. The apostles were not poor men. That is not who they were. They were they had ingenuity, whether right or wrong, that was transformed into something better or useful for God's kingdom. Okay, why do I say this? Because life is very similar to that if we allow it to be. We allow ourselves to be something. We allow ourselves to understand that we're lost or we're misunderstood. And maybe it's not that we necessarily need to soften it or medicate the feeling away. It's that we need to just choose a different path, and we need to explore a path that's more fulfilling. And when we do that, whether we're hesitant or resistant to it because of maybe our sociological upbringing, meaning our environment, we have to go through it. It's the persistence, guys, that makes success. If Colonel Sanders had given up, he would have never made it to his 60s and started KFC. Ray Kroc saw a great idea in the McDonald's brothers in his 50s and then invested the rest of his life. And the result, as we've talked about on other podcasts, is actually the Ronald McDonald House. It's not only the jobs it's created or the employees or the college or the franchisees that it's made wealthy or the shareholders. It's a lot of it is the Ronald McDonald houses and those lives that have been impacted because of Ray Kroc's decision to not give up and be persistent in his life and keep going and going and going and finally finding something at McDonald's. But the 50 years of persistency and not having much success allowed him to have the discipline and the consistency to not give up for the remainder of his life. And we wouldn't have chicken McNuggets in the world if it wasn't for McDonald's, or chicken tenders, I don't believe, but maybe that's not true, but definitely chicken nuggets. So the thing that I want to emphasize then, Jesse, is mentorship, drive, the willingness not to give up, to stay persistent in your journey. Let's talk about those things as we wrap up.
Yeah, my biggest mentor will always be my mom. My mom was very young when her and my father got married. I think she was a sophomore in college when I was born. And the first 20 some odd years of my life, my mom worked for the airlines, which was a very comfortable job for her. She was great at it. And then out of the blue, the airline she worked for was bought, and they were kind of like, okay, well, you can either keep the job, but you're getting paid $12 an hour, or you can take a severance. And, she had a family of 4 kids. She's got a mortgage. She can't raise them on $12 an hour. So she took the severance and, realized, I'll figure it out. I'll make it work. And from there, she took different jobs. And then, one point she was working for the state's attorney's office in Chicago and Illinois and doing 911 translating calls on the weekend. And, I just saw how she never gave up, and she always worked her butt off. And, my mom's always going to be my hero. I saw that. And then she did years of this. And then she applied to be in the FBI, took a test, she didn't score high enough, and it was still a really high score, but for the FBI, you got to be like at the top of your game. They're not just going to be like, oh, you're a C student. Yeah, come on in. And I could see how upset she was. But I told her, I said, Mom, for a middle-aged woman to change careers like you, I'm impressed that you even took this test, and she didn't tell anybody, but she took the test again and aced it. And, you talk about perseverance. That woman, I saw that, and I'm like, she knew what she wanted, and she was going to get it. And, that's my original mentor right there. But from a business standpoint, there's been so many people throughout my life that have shaped who I am with, whether it was like encouragement or whether it was a story that they shared being a business owner. All these things added up to to what I am now, to what I learned and what I saw when I was going through it myself. One of my favorite restaurants in Chicago was this place called Hot Doug's, and Doug Sohn, the owner, and he had written a book, and he had this place, and he was always so kind. And he saw ManBQue when we were just this like small group of meat dorks grilling to like getting our first book deal, and he was always so encouraging and was always there to give advice. And he played a big role in my early business, food business life, especially with the book. He was kind of like, dude, you got this. There's a reason that you got picked to do this book and someone else didn't. And I've always had a strong belief in myself, but like it takes other people that see what you're doing and see the work that you put in and make you realize like, hey, at the end of the day, even if you don't succeed, like the amount of work you've put into this, like you're going to learn something. And I did. And throughout my life, there's been, again, so many people like that. My friend Robbie owns a place called Reggie's down in Chicago. And, he always invited me to combine, do events at his place. So he was giving me a venue to like showcase what we were doing and to get my name out there. I have a buddy, Matt, who used to own a place called Three Aces. He was the chef there, and him and my buddy Anthony, Matt was the chef, and Anthony was the owner, and my buddy Lyle, and like same thing. Those guys were like, "Hey, why don't you come do an event here?" Like these guys opened doors that I will forever be grateful. My buddy Ty, he had bars, and he was like, "Why don't you come do ManBQue here?" Like all these guys that saw something in me, you know, they knew my hustle. I think that was the biggest thing. They saw that I was busting my butt to get our name out there, to be known, and they saw the potential that I had, and they opened their doors, and that was so huge for someone that really had no kitchen experience, just was a glorified home cook, you know, and that wanted to share what he'd been doing, and these guys gave me that venue. And to this day, again, like I said, Aaron from Bill Sandwich Palace, Julio from Maíz La Vida, my buddy Brandon, who's he's a super talented chef turned, I don't want to call him an influencer, but he is an influencer. He's this talented chef that just does really great content. Like all these guys, when I moved down to Nashville, those three guys have been such a critical part of my growth. You know, even Jamie from Pearl Diver too, like giving me that opportunity. You know, he told me that when they were thinking about opening that space at Pearl Diver for someone, you know, him and the partners were like, well, who do we invite to come in? And he said, Secret Bodega. So like guys like that believe in you, people that believe in you will always be the fuel that I use to move forward. Because this isn't easy. Business ownership is not easy, especially in this industry. And, you know, it's when you have people that believe in you, that keeps your tank full and it keeps your engine running. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here, and I probably wouldn't even have taken these chances. Like I said, I'm not a big gambler, but when you have people like that behind you, it's I'm willing to take the gamble. And you know, another huge mentor is my partner Audrey. You know, she's been such a huge part of this. Like she helped me launch Secret Bodega, and she always said, "Hey, I want you. I want this is your baby. I'm going to help you as much as I can, and then you take it from there." And you know, my siblings, they've been a huge support. So it's all these little things that amount to really huge things. So, you know, and I know I'm missing people, but there's again these little things that amount to such a big thing. And here I am, and all I'm trying to do is bust my butt and hopefully make people proud and put out a good product consistently. And you know, maybe someday somebody will talk to me and in the same breath as Ray Kroc or Colonel Sanders, you know, and that's the goal. You know, always can strive to be bigger than you are right now, and you know, to hopefully do the same to other people. You know, hopefully somebody can one day talk about mentorship and say, you know, there was this guy Jesse. He once taught me this or told me this, and I took it to heart because there's been so many people that have done that to me, and you know, all I can do is pay that forward.
I love it, Jesse. Where can they find you online? Where can they find the Pearl Diver? How can they find you guys in Nashville?
Yeah, in Nashville, we're Secret Bodega located inside Pearl Diver in the cool neighborhood of East Nashville. Online, Secret Bodega is at the Secret Bodega. My personal is at Jesse Valenciana, and our website is thesecretbodega.com.
Awesome. Audience, check it out. I was there. I love the food. The place, the Pearl Diver, it's awesome. Ambiance, it's definitely different. I love it. And Nashville, guys, if you're going there, you need to get out of the downtown Broadway tourist areas and go into these places and try the food, see what these entrepreneurs are up to, the influence, the show business, the discipline that I talked about, the growing of a community, everyone trying to grow each other together. It's something worthy of seeing outside of just what goes on in the honky tonks. So it's worth it. Go try the food, guys. There's a reason there's a lot of Nashville entrepreneurs on the show, in contrast to what we said, because they are collaborating with each other. They are working together. They are trying to build an industry. They are building food businesses into the suburbs. And there's a lot of tourism going there. There's a lot of infrastructure being built. There's a lot of support for the city, for the state that wasn't there before. That's there now. And it's Tennessee's time. And pay attention. I keep telling this to everyone. This is not these entrepreneurs. The reason their individuals are going to Nashville is because these type of individuals understand that social media is collaborative, marketing is collaborative, and food is collaborative as well. Whether we like it or not, we have to collaborate with the farmer to get the food on our plate, even though we just buy through U.S. Foods. We're collaborating with the farmer. The farmer didn't take those many months to grow that vegetable or years to grow that animal, potentially. If it's a larger animal, you wouldn't have any food. And so this whole thing where we're competitive with each other and whatever, we have really need to understand that we're collaborative in the whole process already. So if we don't lean into it, we're not really going anywhere. That's what I'm going to leave everyone with, because that is it. You need to build your community. Your community does a lot in food and in our recipes and in our plates and our dishes that we serve everyone. There's a lot of different ingredients that come from a lot of different places. That means that we are collaborating. There may be someone, a collaborator like a U.S. Foods in the middle, but it's still a collaboration. And it's still profitable, hopefully, for all parties. And all parties are creating jobs and having impact on their communities, hopefully. So I'll leave that with everyone. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Like, share, comment on the episode. If you learned anything or appreciate anything from the episode, pay the dues. Pay the dues. And you know what that is? It's free podcasts. Like, share, comment. Go to the entrepreneurs who are giving you the lessons. Like, share, comment on their pages. Try their food. Go visit them. At this point, you could do a pretty solid 2-week tour of Nashville just from a food standpoint and the surrounding areas on the podcasts I've done just for the food entrepreneurs in Nashville, guys. So, food tourism is a big deal, right? I've traveled the world, but really I've eaten my way through every city I've ever come in encounter with because I want to try the food. And for me, I break bread. I want to know the individuals there. I want to understand the chefs. I want to understand the trends. I want to understand the new foods in those cities because that's where the adventure is. That's where the future is. Museums, they're great. They help us understand the past, and history helps us understand the future. But the future in food is through collaboration. And it is through an open mind. I love you guys, and I'm out.